I want to talk about the types of unique mechanisms. So there are really three main types. There are really four types of unique mechanisms, but there are three main types. These are kind of and I don't want you to get caught up so much in being like, like black and white. Is this one? Is this one? I want you to be able to just put these into different categories when you see mechanisms, and you're going to forever see mechanisms by the time we are done. So the first type of mechanism is the existing mechanism. And we're going to break these down. First type is an existing mechanism. And really the simplest way to think about this is when there is something just immediately recognizable as different, as unique. Then there is what's called the unspoken mechanism. This goes back to what somebody asked earlier about the Schlitz beer story, which I'm going to share with you. There is what's called the transubstantiated mechanism, which is the most common type of mechanism. And then there is the metaphorical mechanism. And the metaphorical mechanism is really is the most rare. I should say it's the least common in that there's a special instance when it's used, which I'm going to explain to you. So let's go through this. So some examples of an existing mechanism, and number one is the E5 method. Right? Like there is a very different approach to creating, to setting up campaign, like from beginning to end. There is just a very different approach behind the E5 method. Like it is built in. It's immediately apparent that in the E5 method, there is a different approach to creating campaigns. And similar to this, and these are all the examples that I gave, my friend Ryan Levesque, who many of you may know. Ryan Levesque is the author of Ask and what is the other one? And Choose. He is the creator of the Ask method. Ironically, these both have, the first three examples have the word method in there, which I wouldn't read anything into that. But this is a great example because and I want you to check this out. So I want you to notice this. So the ask method is, and listen to me, please. I know that we've been going for a little bit over 2 hours already, and some of you are probably hungry, but hang in there. Listen, please. So Ryan has a unique approach to creating quizzes, polls, and assessments. He's got a completely different process, really, in terms of how he surveys, what questions he asks, how he looks at those questions, how he uses those questions, how he puts together the surveys, the number of questions that he asks, the order in which he asks those questions, the type of questions that he asks. He has a whole process. Now, if you look at this, Ryan is a good friend of mine. I've spoken for him years ago at a couple of his masterminds for his folks. And what I said to his folks, even I said, like, look, right, Ryan, and this is what I want you to get. Ryan doesn't talk about how to grow a business or do better list segmentation with quizzes and polls and assessments. He doesn't talk about how to do better list segmentation and get a responsive list with quizzes, polls, and surveys. Because if that's what he did, quizzes, polls, and surveys are a commoditized mechanism. They are available anywhere. You could go to Google and do a search and find quizzes in marketing, surveys in marketing, polls in marketing, assessments in marketing. You could go and find YouTube videos on it, blog posts on it, other people talking about quizzes, polls, surveys. No, Ryan doesn't teach that. Ryan teaches his process of using polls, quizzes, and surveys. His process, which is called the Ask method. The Ask method, which is different from the common approach to using quizzes and polls and surveys. And Ryan can explain, as he does, and he does it really well. He can explain what makes it different and what makes it more effective than the typical approach to surveys, polls, and whatnot. So when Ryan talks about the outcome, the result, He's talking about the result that you can experience from the ask method. When he is sharing success stories, he's sharing success stories not of people that used quizzes and polls and surveys, but people that used the ask method. When Ryan is demonstrating results, he's not demonstrating results from quizzes, polls, and surveys. He's demonstrating results of the ask method. The ask method is his unique mechanism. His ask method masterclass, I believe, which it's called, is the product. So when Ryan talks about the ask method masterclass, right, and what you get with it and what it'll do for you, blah, 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 that's the product. But when Ryan is talking about the ask method, that is his mechanism. And right, and he differentiates his mechanism. He contrasts his mechanism against the typical way of doing polls, surveys, right? And so nobody, by the time you're done with one of Ryan's campaigns, right, and I've spoken to him about this, his campaigns and doing this at length, right? People are not bought into simple quizzes, polls, and surveys. They're bought into the ask method for using polls, quizzes, and surveys. Just like with Ted, right? With Ted, when we talked about, right, like Ted is not selling people on LinkedIn marketing. He's selling people on his method of using LinkedIn to generate more sales. Just like Ryan is leading people to see the value of his method of using and deploying surveys and whatnot. And like Terry said, he does it very well. He understands this principle of unique mechanism and educating on the value of the unique mechanism, getting buy-in on the unique mechanism, and then offering the way for them to get the unique mechanism, right? So he convinces you of the value of the ask method, shows you what it can do, shows you who's used it and what results it's produced, proves why his method of deploying surveys, polls, and quizzes, the ask method, is superior to the typical way. And then once you see, man, the ask method sounds amazing, not polls, quizzes, surveys. The ask method sounds amazing. And then he offers you the opportunity to get into his masterclass, which is the fulfillment of the ask method. Same thing with, so I don't know how many of you, if any of you know Kurt Malley. Kurt Malley is like a Facebook dude, a Facebook wizard. And so a couple of years ago, I had some of the top media buyers in the direct response world. I had 45 of them, something like that, in Baltimore. I think actually JMC, who I believe is on here, was in attendance, I believe. Like, folks from, Purple Mattress, the media buyer from Ty Lopez, Agora, ClickFunnels, Onyx and Gall, Keith Krantz, like it was stacked. And in the end, they all voted for who they felt, which media buyer they felt gave the best value over the 2 days. And I awarded that person a belt, a heavyweight championship belt that I had specifically created. That's where Kurt got the belt method, right? That after I awarded him that belt, he decided to kind of formalize his process. So when Kurt talks about using, getting traffic from Facebook and what, he is not talking about Facebook advertising. He's not educating on Facebook advertising. He's not building the value around Facebook advertising. He's not getting you bought into Facebook advertising. He's getting you bought into the belt method of using Facebook advertising, his process, his methodology, his approach that he happens to call the belt method. And then I believe he also has the belt method masterclass. And so there you go, Glenn, I dig it. And so I love the Ask Method so much. I became an Ask Method certified pro. Great. I mean, Ryan is a sharp cookie. I can share with you one of the very first webinars that I believe he ever did with me. I have a lot less gray. I don't think I had a beard yet. And he was like this little, it was awesome. And he's an amazing dude. And Kurt, like my point, you see the similarity here, right? Like that Kurt not getting buy-in on Facebook advertising, not teaching you Facebook advertising. He's getting buy-in on the belt method. And what is the belt method? It's just his method for doing or using Facebook advertising. right? And so when you think about, right, I could learn Facebook advertising, like, or I could learn the belt method. The belt method is proprietary. It's only available through Kurt. So who was it earlier? I think it was it Ryan? Ryan asked earlier about all roads lead to you. Well, let's say you hear a presentation about the belt method. Let's say hypothetically, even, let's just make it real simple and say that, that you heard 2, 3, 4 people on a live stream talking about how great the belt method is, right? And their experience with it and what it's done for their business and how unbelievable the belt method is and how they struggled with Facebook before, Facebook advertising, and now they're experiencing great results, and they just credit the belt method for all that. Well, now, right, the only place to get it is from Kurt. You cannot go and learn the belt method anywhere else. That is an all roads lead to Kurt position, because it is a proprietary solution. Now imagine that all those people were talking about Facebook advertising and how they used Facebook advertising and how Facebook advertising changed their business. And now, right, Facebook advertising was the game changer and how they love it and it's great and all different. Now they just opened up Pandora's box, because now you can go and you can research, you can start to look around, you could start to maybe do some research on your own. Let me see if I could learn some stuff from tutorials from YouTube. Let me read a book. Let me go to Amazon and get Facebook advertising for dummies or whatever, right? And so see how that is roads lead everywhere. Whereas when you have a unique mechanism and you focus on getting buy-in on the unique mechanism, you create an all roads lead to you path. All roads lead to you path. And so belt method. Last one, which is similar, is my buddy Jeff Walker. And so some of you may know Jeff. And so Jeff has been around a long time. Jeff and I have known each other for, gosh, I don't even know, 12, 13 years, something like that now at this point, 15 years maybe. And so Jeff has product launch formula. Now think about this for 1 second. Okay. And hopefully this is kind of starting to make sense for you. That, right? Like, so Jeff is not, though, teaching how to launch a product, right? If you want to know, how do I launch a product? How do I market a new product? Go to Google and you'll find millions of listings. Go to YouTube. You'll find tons and tons of videos on how to launch a product. No, what Jeff is teaching you is his product launch formula, his process, his method, his system for launching a product, right? And so when Jeff is educating, he's not educating on the value of launching a product. He's educating on the value of launching a product with product launch formula. Right? When he's showing results, he's not showing results of what people can achieve when they launch a product properly. He's showing what can be achieved when people launch their product with product launch formula, with PLF. Right. And so he's not presenting the generic. If you want to know how to launch a product, go and you could do some research and you can find a ton of stuff. You can find books, you can find YouTube videos, you can find blog posts. But if you want to know PLF, if you want to know product launch formula, right, Jeff or one of his licensees are the only source, because he is the only purveyor of PLF, just like Kurt is the only purveyor of the belt method, just like Ryan is the only purveyor of the ask method, just like we are the only source of the E5 method. And so, right, that's, Ryan, when it's all roads lead to you, because once you want the mechanism, you can only go to one place to get it. My aim for each and every one of you is to have you be that one place, right? That one source. And so in here, what you're talking about is a fully fleshed out methodology. It's an existing mechanism, because there is a different process in each of these cases to what there is an actual different process, different set of steps, different system, different approach. Some deep, the belt method is a very deep method. Even Ryan within the ask method has he's got the deep dive survey, which, right, he's got, like, if you look at all of these, in all of these instances, and we're going to talk more about this later, these are unique mechanisms that are, they're frameworks. They're big frameworks that consist of a lot of different steps. And even within those different steps, there are different unique mechanisms. So the E5 method, the ask method, the belt method, the product launch formula are all in and of themselves unique mechanisms. But then you take, let's say, the ask method. Glenn can attest to this. And Ryan's got his deep dive survey thing. which is his approach to surveying your audience to get the information that you need, right? And there's a certain way, there's a certain set of questions, and there's a certain, there's a certain structure and process to it. That in of itself, right, is a and so each of these, right, these are existing mechanisms. Still the cornerstone of the research method for us. That's awesome. I love that. Right. And that you think of Deep Dive Survey, who's that linked to? It's linked to one person. It's linked to Ryan, right? Deep Dive Survey, linked to Ryan. Think of Seed Launch, linked to Jeff Walker, right? You think of, even ironically, as meta as this sounds, you think of the unique mechanism, Todd, right? E5 method. Segmentation survey, traffic measurement. I love it. It's awesome. See how both, right? Like see how, and it's Philip, right? See, Sin Offer, JMC, absolutely. Glenn, right? You see how there's a process there, right? Ryan, it wasn't like, let me teach you how to do surveys better, right? I'm going to teach you how to do surveys better. I'm going to teach you surveys, or I'm a wizard when it comes to surveys. And so I'm going to teach you the right way to do surveys. Everybody else he had a unique method, a unique process, a unique framework, a unique system, a unique set of steps that he named. That's really all it is that I want you to understand. It's the identifying of it, the naming it, and then the deploying it, which you're going to learn. And so here, so the unspoken mechanism, I forget who mentioned this earlier about the Schlitz beer story, but there was this, there's this story, whether legend or not, that Schlitz beer was losing market share. And so Schlitz beer brought in Claude Hopkins, one of the godfathers of direct response, of scientific marketing, scientific advertising, and for help. And so Claude Hopkins said, let me take a tour of one of your manufacturing plants. And so while he was being taken on the tour of the manufacturing plant, which, by the way, as a side note, there's a lesson right there in and of itself, right? That Claude Hopkins didn't just sit down and assume that he understood what was going on. He wanted to see how they do what they do, why they do what they do, where they do what they do, when they do what they do. Like, he dug in, right? He examined, so to speak, right? He didn't just start writing copies. Like, take me on a tour of the manufacturing facility. And so while he was being taken on tour, he saw something going on in the corner or whatever. And what's going on over there? And the guy taking him on the tour said, oh, that's where we sterilize all of the bottles, and we sterilize all the bottles before we put the beer in there. And Claude Hopkins said, well, why aren't you telling anybody that? And the guy said to him, because every beer manufacturer does that. Every beer manufacturer has a sterilization process. And Claude Hopkins said, but nobody is telling the market. And so Claude created campaigns around their process for purity of the beer, like their sterilization process. And you could see here, he knows purity in filtered air, right? Things that, like, he recognized that just because others are doing, and there's an important point here that I want to give you, just because others are doing it, if others are not, meaning competitors are doing it, if others are not talking about it to the marketplace, you can use it as a unique mechanism. So what I want you to understand is that unique mechanism, the word unique applies to prospects, meaning that, is it unique to prospects? Is it unique in their eyes? Will they view it as unique? Not, is it unique amongst competitors? Because even if your competitors are doing it, but if they're not talking about it and you talk about it, it can be a unique mechanism for you. Right. And so it could be a unique mechanism for you. This is a perfect example. So Claude Hopkins, after this campaign, he reacquired a tremendous amount of market share way back for Schlitz beer, just by identifying, seeing that they were doing something that helped with the purity, if you will, of the beer, that even though other competitors were doing it, they weren't talking about it. And so he talked about it. And now this became the point of differentiation. And so the unspoken mechanism, the idea here is that, and this goes back to the questions that were asked about, like, well, what if I'm doing the very same thing as everybody else? And let's say you're doing the identical, like to the T, identical thing that everybody else is doing. Well, what part of that process, which is responsible for producing results, are competitors not talking about in their marketing that you could talk about? So just because you're doing the same exact thing to the T, if that was the case, which I would have to, again, I would question you on that, just by talking about it, it gives you the ability to have a unique mechanism. So the unspoken mechanism is a part, an aspect of your process, your system, your approach, your framework that is not unique amongst competitors, but competitors aren't talking about it. Therefore, you can use it as a mechanism. Then we've got the transubstantiated mechanism. And this term, transubstantiation, it was presented to me. I first learned this many, many years ago from a gentleman by the name of Bill Bonner. Bill is the founder of Agora, the Agora companies, which is like a $1.5 billion direct response company today. They're a client of mine. I've done consulting for, I think, a half a dozen different entities for them, both domestically and abroad. And the idea of transubstantiation comes from Roman Catholicism, and it's the turning the wine into the blood of Christ. And really, it's turning the ordinary into the extraordinary. It's taking the ordinary and turning it into the extraordinary. And this is the most common kind of way of that mechanisms are created. Doesn't mean that it's the best, right? Ideally, you've got an existing mechanism, which I'm going to walk you through the process of potentially identifying that for you. But this is the most common. And so let's take a tripwire. How many of you know what a tripwire is? If you know what a tripwire is, just put Y in the chat. Let's put a Y. I'm curious, how many of you know what a tripwire is? Yeah, everybody. Yep. No. Okay. Did I see a no? Okay. Interesting. Okay. Very cool. So, tripwire, just since we had one no, is an ultra low priced offer. It's an ultra low barrier of entry offer, low ticket offer, designed to make it, brain dead simple for somebody to say yes, right? To reduce barrier of entry by reducing financial risk, by making it an easy yes. Close. You're close, Kevin. It wasn't Russell, and Russell's a dear friend of mine as well, but it wasn't Russell who came up with it. Who knows who first coined tripwire? Yes, exactly. You got it. Yep. There it is. Ryan, digital marketer. All good that you're new. Totally cool. Perry and Ryan. Exactly. Right. And so Perry and Ryan. Now, let me ask you this. So, right, they were the guys that first coined tripwire offer, ultra low priced offer, right? Low ticket offer, low barrier of entry offer. And this was, I don't even know, maybe I remember when they introduced it. I'm not sure, 15 years ago, 12 years ago, something like that. I don't even remember now at this point, but let's say 12, 13 years. Let's say 12 years ago. And I could be wrong on that. But so, right, the question is, right, did a low ticket, low barrier of entry offer exist prior to 12 years ago? In other words, was nobody prior to 12 years ago using an ultra low ticket offer? Of course they were. Right? It was all over. It was being used, right? Low ticket offers have been around since the beginning of time, right? Like, in fact, you could make the case, right? And this is, Ryan and Perry are also friends. This is not a knock against them. This is a tip of the hat to them, right? This is an example of a smart move. They saw low ticket offers being used, right? And what they did was they took it, they made it part of their overall system, and they transubstantiated it from low ticket, low cost, low barrier of entry offer into the tripwire, which became an industry-wide term now used, right? But they took the ordinary and bundled it and made it part of something bigger and turned it from the ordinary into the extraordinary by talking about a tripwire. If they would have said an ultra low ticket, low priced offer, right? Well, now you're talking about a commodity. If you're talking about you need to learn a tripwire offer, well, who was the only source to learn the tripwire offer when they introduced it to the marketplace? They were. Therefore, if you wanted to learn about a tripwire offer and how to use a tripwire offer, right, you had to go to them, right, to learn a tripwire as part of their overall system. And so that was an example. It's a simple example of an ordinary mechanism turned into something extraordinary by bringing it in and making it part of something else. I have, which I don't talk about all that often, but I used to use on a very regular basis. We still do actually. What's called a reverse add-on offer. Reverse add-on offer is basically an upsell that is priced lower than the initial product. And so let's say you're selling a product for $100 and you have an upsell that is priced at $40, right? And so you sell something for $100 and then you offer them an add-on to that purchase for $40, right? And it crushes it. It kills it. It knocks it out of the park. And that's because, just as a side note, right, that's the typical way that commerce happens, right? Like what's taught online is when you're creating an upsell to create something that's 3 times the price point of what it is that you just offered. If you just sold something for $100, offer an upsell for $300. But the reality is, where in the world of commerce do you go and do you buy something and then are you offered something 3 times the price, right? You don't go in and buy an iPhone charger and you're offered an iMac, right? Like it doesn't work that way. You don't, right? Like you go in and you buy a men's suit for $3,000. You're offered, a $200 shirt. You're offered, $200 shoes. You're offered something that is a fraction of the price. And so, right, I talked about it as a reverse add-on. And I talked about how a reverse add-on, it produced significant conversions, which it does because it taps into what is expected from consumers. And so that's an example of the ordinary. What was the ordinary? The ordinary was an upsell price lower than the core offer, but positioning it as a reverse add-on offer changes the frame. Invisible funnel. This came from Russell. Invisible funnel was basically a soft offer where somebody comes to, like a webinar, and then at the end of the webinar, they are pitched on a product. So I forget exactly what it is, but he called it the invisible webinar. He didn't just say what you want to do is you want to run a webinar where you don't charge anybody, and then at the end you sell them on something else. He called it an invisible funnel, and you could see how all of these are just names like given to a method, like a method that was brought together, right? And just given a name, not using the commoditized name. How many of you are familiar with Profit First? So Profit First, cool process, right? If you really think about Profit First, which is the method, the framework, the process, the system. There's a book about it. Mike Michalowicz. Profit First is really simple. It is this method of a business owner taking a distribution off of the gross profit, not waiting for the net profit. So meaning that you have revenue, and then you have cost of goods sold. You have if you sell a physical product, or if you have traffic, then you have gross profit. And then out of the gross profit, below gross profit, you have things like your internet, your team, your software, your tech. And then there is net profit. Net profit is bottom line. And the typical entrepreneur takes their profit distribution from the bottom, from net profit. Well, Mike's whole process is based on taking your distribution as an owner from the gross profit before your operating expenses. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, pretty ordinary, but Profit First turns that ordinary accounting process into a mechanism. And there are just tons of examples of, I won't even bore you with these. These are all just names given to, like the, $50 marijuana stock blueprint was a promotion from the guys at Stansberry Research that was like about how you can get started invest as an investor in the cannabis space with $50. And right, so you're talking about how to invest in cheap cannabis stocks, right? Starting with only $50, but they called it the $50 marijuana stock blueprint. And so it's just taking the ordinary and giving it a name that substantiates it into something extraordinary, if that makes sense. The last one, and then we're going to take a break for lunch, is the metaphorical mechanism. And so the metaphorical mechanism works like this. This is different. I said that this is, even though this is considered the fourth type of mechanism, unique mechanism, this is really this is what you would use when you are marketing and selling a pure commodity, like a commoditized, when what you are selling is, let's say, there is zero difference there. Like the what you're ultimately marketing is already known, is already available, is already out there. It is a pure commodity. Like there is no system or strategy or approach. Well, when there's no system, strategy, approach, when there's nothing unique, when there's nothing different, if you lead with that commodity, and I'm going to break this down for you so that you understand this, you immediately trigger with prospects what's called mental opt-out, where they're like, I've heard it, I've seen it. This promotion right here was one of the most successful promotions in the financial publishing industry, maybe longer than a decade ago for sure, maybe 2 decades ago. What this was about, well, you can see the secret currency, how the world's wealthiest families make money even when stocks, bonds, and real estate lose value. This entire promotion, this entire campaign was about there's a secret currency that exists that lies beyond the reach of any government. It's been used, right? It can protect your wealth. It was this whole case that was built to show value in this secret currency. But at no point in time in this promotion was the secret currency ever revealed, or what the secret currency was. And then there was a report that was offered in the end that you could get on how to take advantage of this secret currency and bring it into your portfolio and blah, blah, blah. But what the secret currency was gold. And so it was just about investing in gold. That was it. That was it. There was no unique method to investing in gold, no unique process to investing in gold. It was just about investing in gold. But rather than say, right, how to invest in gold, which at the time was and still is a commodity, it's that type of message, that type of offer, that type of hook is available everywhere. There's nothing unique, nothing different about that. It's just more of the same. So what you see here is a metaphor, if you will, a way to kind of a fancy pants way to talk about the commodity without talking about the commodity. And you typically, when you see a metaphorical mechanism being used, you'll typically see quotations around it. So when there's quotations around it, that is a good indicator that for you that they're using a metaphorical mechanism, that it's not, there is no real like secret currency. They're not going to reveal to you a real secret currency, a new currency or something like that. Even if they were to say the new currency, right? It's not that they're trying to say there really is a new currency. The quotes show you that that's what they're calling it. So meaning that think of a metaphorical mechanism as a nickname, a way that you refer to it without referring to it as the commodity. So if you were talking about, retargeting, and you were just talking about retargeting, maybe you don't call it retargeting. You have a nickname that you call it, right? The, personalized, personal, whatever, advertising thing. And you put quotes around it. So it's when you have a pure commodity and you have a pure commodity, you're going to use your nickname, your metaphorical name or metaphorical positioning for it. Canadian Social Security is one of my favorites. And so, David, the metaphorical mechanism is just a way of taking a commodity, a commoditized solution, a commoditized method, a commoditized process, and talking about it without trying to say that I've got a new thing, like without saying here the new investment method. Right? Because you can't say that, because that would be a lie, because investing in gold is not a new method. Now, if they had a new method of investing in gold, a new process of investing in gold, that's one thing, right? If they had a method, a system, a process, a framework, that's one thing. They could then name that unique mechanism, that process, that framework, that system. But if they were just talking about gold, they can't say the new investment for you to get into, because that would be a lie. It's not a new investment. So how do you talk about a commodity without lying while telling the truth, right? But not revealing that that what you're talking about is pure, is the pure commodity. You use the metaphorical mechanism. And so you're basically, for lack of a better phrase for you guys, I would say you're hiding it behind the nickname. So you're hiding it behind the nickname, in this case, secret currency. and we'll talk a little bit about towards, when we get into like actually fleshing this out and identifying your mechanism and naming and all that stuff. Like this is, like this comes about through examination, through research, through, the gentleman who wrote this is Mike Palmer, one of the greatest financial copywriters ever, right? And the question becomes, well, we're going to talk about gold, but how do we talk about gold without naming gold? Because if we name gold, immediately prospects are going to say, heard it, seen it, been there, done that, already, right? Goes back to prospect awareness. The prospect, the promise exposure spectrum. Right. So how do we talk about gold without calling it gold? Right. Well, now when they look back, right, in the history of gold, when they dig in, when they do a little bit of, when they did a little bit of research, they were able to find that there was a time when gold was used kind of hush hush way back, medieval times, through certain governments. It was always used for barter. It was always used in trade, even regardless of what was going on with the main currency. Gold was always being swapped. Well, that's like a secret currency. So very, this is not common, right? This, you don't see this nearly as often as you see the other mechanisms. But this is definitely an option. This is the option that you can go with when you are talking about a pure commodity. So we've looked at a variety of levels here. Right. So we looked at, you've got the existing mechanism when, I'm going to teach you how to, first and foremost, we want to dig in. We want to look to see, do you have an existing mechanism? We never want to immediately go to this default to, I don't have I don't have an existing mechanism. I'm going to show you how to interrogate. In many, many, many cases, the overwhelming majority of cases, you do. But if you don't, right, you could go on, is there an unspoken mechanism? Is there a piece of this that my competitors are doing, using, that I'm using, that is responsible for producing the result, but they're not talking about it, that we can talk about it? Is there a transubstantiated mechanism that we can use? What is the ordinary, like what are the different pieces of what it is that I'm doing? What are the ordinary ways that they're talked about, that they're talked about? How can I take one of those or more of those and transubstantiate it? Or am I just selling a pure commodity and therefore I need a metaphorical mechanism? This is why I say that regardless of what it is that you have, regardless of what it is that you are offering, you can absolutely have a unique mechanism.